The sun bled crimson over Iron Hollow, Nevada, 1884, as if the desert had a wound it couldn't close. Dust swirled like restless spirits, clawing at the cracked earth and stinging the eyes of anyone foolish enough to linger. At the town's edge, an abandoned livery stable sagged under a sky heavy with heat, its roof caved in, its walls blackened by a fire no one dared mention. The air carried a sour tang of ash and something darker. Like secrets left to rot, that's where Levi Kane found them, three figures slumped against a splintered stall, still as stones. A woman, her wrists bound with rawhide, her black hair matted with blood and sand, her crimson dress faded to a ghostly red, torn at the shoulder and hem. Two boys, no older than 7 and 9, huddled beside her, their bare feet caked with dirt, clutching a torn leather satchel like it was their last anchor to the world. They weren't crying. That's what stopped Levi cold, his boots frozen in the dust. Levi swung off his mare, her hooves stirring the silence, her breath clouding in the cooling air. He was no savior, years drifting from one dusty town to another had burned that out of him, but those boys' eyes hit him like a punch. The older one, with dusty blonde hair cropped short, stared with eyes hard as flint, wide and unblinking, rimmed red but dry as bone. The younger, his dark curls plastered to his sweat-streaked face, pressed into his brother's side, his small hands gripping the satchel's frayed strap. Levi crouched low, his leather duster creaking, his voice rough as gravel. "You alive?" he asked, his gaze on the woman. Her eyes, dark amber and sharp with pain, cracked open, haunted and wary. "You one of them?" she rasped, her voice scraped raw, like she'd screamed herself silent long before. "Ain't one of anybody," Levi said, pulling a bone-handled knife from his belt. He sliced the raw hide from her wrists, careful not to graze her bruised skin, the bindings falling like shed snakeskin. The boys watched, their breaths shallow, their grip on the satchel tightening. Levi offered his canteen, the metal warm from the saddlebag. The woman Leela, she'd later say, sipped slowly, her hands trembling, water dribbling down her chin. "Who did this?" he asked, his eyes scanning her bloodied temple, the torn dress, the boy's bare feet. Leela shook her head, her gaze darting to the horizon, as if the desert itself might betray her. "Don't," she whispered, her voice breaking. Not in front of them. The livery stable groaned as a gust swept through, kicking up dust that stung Levi's face. His mare snorted, pawing the ground, her ears twitching like she sensed the wrongness in the air. Levi felt it to a prickle down his spine, like the desert was watching. Iron Hollow was a town on its last legs, its saloon and general store, the only pulses of life, but whispers here traveled faster than the wind. "We can't stay," he said, more to himself than to them. Leela tried to stand, her legs buckling, her breath hitching as she clutched the stall for support. Levi caught her arm, her weight light as a ghost's, her skin cold despite the heat. The boys rose, silent, their bare feet leaving faint prints in the dust, and followed like shadows. Tethered to her dot at the heart of Iron Hollow stood the Rusty Spur, a saloon that smelled of whiskey and regret, its warped boards creaking underfoot. Mara Tate ran it, a widow with a graying braid pinned tight and brown eyes that missed nothing. She stood behind the counter, polishing a glass, her apron stained with years of spilled drinks. As Levi carried Leela inside, the saloon's half-dozen patrons, cowhands, and drifters froze, their murmurs dying. Mara's eyes narrowed, her voice sharp as a spur. "What's this, Kane? You dragging trouble into my place?" Levi set Leela on a chair near the hearth, the boys hovering close, their satchel clutched tight. "Found and tied up at the livery," he said, his tone flat but firm. "They need a bed, Mara." "Not your tongue." Mara's gaze flicked to the boys, their hollow cheeks and unblinking stares stirring a memory she'd buried deep. Her son lost to fever a decade ago. Her jaw softened, but her voice stayed hard. "Upstairs. Second room on the left. But if trouble follows, it's your funeral." She tossed Levi a brass key, its edges worn smooth. The saloon's air thickened with whispers, the patrons' eyes sharp with judgment, some muttering about strays and bad blood. Levi ignored them, leading Leela and the boys up the creaking stairs to a small room with a sagging cot and a cracked window. As he closed the door, The younger boy's voice broke the silence, a whisper sharp with fear. "They're coming back, ain't they?" Levi met his gaze, the boy's dark eyes like a mirror to his own buried past. Who had bound them, and what was in that satchel they guarded like a secret worth dying for? The Rusty Spurs upstairs room was a fragile sanctuary, its cracked window letting in the chill of the Nevada night. Dust motes danced in the lantern's glow, casting shadows on the sagging cot where Leela lay, her black hair fanned across. A threadbare pillow, her crimson dress torn and faded, clung to her like a ghost's shroud. Her amber eyes half open, heavy with exhaustion and secrets. The boys, Caleb and Sam, sat huddled on the floor, their bare feet tucked beneath them, the torn satchel clutched tight between them. Levi Kane stood by the door, his leather duster still dusted with sand, his deep brown eyes scanning the room like a man who'd learned to distrust stillness. The saloon below hummed with muted voices, but up here, the silence was thick, broken. Only by the creak of the floorboards. Mara Tate pushed through the door, her graying braids swinging, her brown eyes sharp but softened by the sight of the boys. She carried a tray with a tin cup of water and a plate of cornbread, setting it on a rickety table. "Eat," she said, her voice gruff but kind. "You ain't ghosts yet, Caleb." The older boy with dusty blonde hair glanced at the food but didn't move. Sam, his dark curls framing a pale face, pressed closer to his brother, his small hands gripping the satchel's strap. Leela stirred, her voice a hoarse whisper. "They don't trust easy," she said, her gaze flickering to Levi. "Neither do I." Levi leaned against the wall, his bone-handled knife glinting at his belt. "Who bound you?" he asked again, his tone low but pressing. Lila's eyes darted to the boys, then back to him, her cracked lips parting. "Men who think debts are paid with blood," she said, her words heavy with something unspoken. "They took everything, my home, my name, left us at the livery to break us." Her hand trembled as she touched Caleb's shoulder, her fingers brushing his tattered shirt. "This satchel, it's all we got left." Mara's eyes narrowed, her hands pausing on her apron. "Debts don't justify tying a woman and kids like cattle," she said, her voice cutting through the room's haze. "Who's they?" Leela shook her head, her amber eyes haunted. "Names won't undo it. They'll come for us again." The boy's silence was louder than her words, their unblinking stares fixed on the satchel, as if it held more than just cloth and leather. The lantern flickered, throwing jagged shadows across the room. Levi stepped closer, his boots soft on the warped boards. "What's in that bag?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. Caleb's hands tightened, and Sam flinched, his small body curling inward. Lila's gaze hardened. "Something they want. Bad enough to kill for," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I won't let him have it." The air grew heavy, the weight of her words settling like dust. Mara glanced at Levi, her brow furrowing, but she said nothing, her own past a son lost to fever, a husband to the mind stirring in her chest. A sharp knock echoed from downstairs, cutting through the tension like a blade. Mara's head snapped toward the sound, her hand instinctively reaching for the derringer tucked in her apron pocket. Levi's fingers brushed his revolver, his eyes meeting hers. "Stay here," she said, her voice low, and slipped out, closing the door behind her. The saloon's hum fell silent, replaced by the heavy tread of boots and a voice, cold and commanding, demanding the drifter and his strays. Levi's jaw tightened, his gaze flicking to Leela and the boys. "Get under the cot," he whispered. Leela hesitated, then pulled Caleb and Sam down, their small bodies disappearing into the shadows. The satchel clutched tight. Mara's voice rang out below, sharp and defiant. "Ain't no strays here, Gideon. Take your men and your whiskey and get out." Gideon Voss, Iron Hollow's mining boss, was a name Levi knew, a man whose greed ran deeper than the silver veins he chased. The floorboards creaked as boots moved closer, and Levi cracked the door open, peering down. Gideon, broad and grizzled, stood in a black coat, his gray eyes glinting like steel, flanked by hired guns with rifles. "We know they're here, Mara," he growled. "Hand 'em over, or the saloon burns again." The threat hung heavy, and Levi's hand tightened on his revolver. What was in that satchel, and why was it worth torching a town to claim? The Rusty Spurs upstairs room was a fortress of shadows, its cracked window rattling as the Nevada wind howled outside. Leela sat on the cot, her black hair loose, her amber eyes darting between her boys, Caleb and Sam, who clung to their torn satchel like it was a lifeline. Her faded crimson dress, torn at the shoulder, hung heavy with dust, her wrists still raw from the rawhide bindings. Levi Kane stood by the door, his leather duster brushing the floor, his deep brown eyes scanning the darkness beyond the lantern's glow. The saloon below had gone quiet, but the air thrummed with danger. Gideon Voss's threat, hand him over or the saloon burns again, still echoing like a gunshot. Mara Tate slipped back into the room, her graying braid tight, her brown eyes sharp with worry. She clutched her derringer, her apron stained with whiskey and resolve. Gideon's men are circling, she whispered, her voice low but steady. They ain't leaving without what they came for. Levi's hand rested on his revolver, his jaw tight. What's in that satchel worth burning a town for? He asked, his gaze locking on Leela. She hesitated, her fingers brushing Caleb's blonde hair, then Sam's dark curls. A ledger, she said, her voice barely audible. My husband's. It names men who'd rather stay ghosts. Caleb's eyes widened, his small hands tightening on the satchel. Sam pressed closer, his breath hitching. Levi frowned, the pieces falling into place. Lila's husband, a prospector, must have crossed Gideon Voss, Iron Hollow's mining boss, and paid the ultimate price. What kind of names? Levi pressed. Lila's amber eyes darkened. The kind that tie Gideon to stolen claims, blood money, and a fire that wasn't no accident. Mara sucked in a breath, her own memories of the livery fire, her brother's death in its flames stirring like ash. That fire took half the town, she said. You sayin' Gideon lit it? Before Leela could answer, a crash shook the saloon below, glass shattering and wood splintering. Men's shouts cut through the night, Gideon's voice rising above them. Kane, you can't hide him forever. Levi cracked the door, peering down. Gideon stood in the saloon, his black coat dusted with sand, gray eyes glinting like a predator's, his two hired guns leveling rifles at the bar. Mara's patrons scattered, chairs toppling, but she stood firm, her derringer raised. You ain't burnin' my place, Voss, she growled, her voice a blade. Gideon laughed, cold and hollow. Then give me the woman and that bag. Levi turned to Leela, his voice low. Take the boys, back window leads to the alley. Go now. Leela shook her head, her amber eyes fierce. I ain't leavin' you to fight my war. Caleb clutched the satchel tighter, his voice a whisper. They'll kill us, Ma. Sam's small hand gripped her dress, his dark eyes wide with fear. Mara stepped closer, her derringer still in hand. There's a trapdoor under the rug, she said. Leads to the cellar. Hide there. Leela hesitated, then nodded, pulling the boys toward the rug, their bare feet silent as they slipped into the dark. Levi descended the stairs, his boots heavy, his revolver drawn. The saloon's air was thick with smoke and tension, the lantern light flickering on scarred wood. Gideon's men shifted, their rifles trained on him, but Levi's gaze locked on Voss. You want that ledger, you'll have to go through me, he said, his voice calm but deadly. Gideon smirked, his gray eyes narrowing. You're a fool, Kane. That ledger's my noose and theirs. The saloon went still, the only sound the wind rattling the windows. What names were in that ledger? And what truth was worth risking a mother and her sons to keep buried? The Rusty Spur trembled under the weight of Gideon Voss's threat, its scarred wooden walls bathed in the flickering glow of lanterns. Below, the saloon's air was thick with smoke and menace, the shattered glass crunching under the boots of Gideon's hired guns. Levi Kane stood halfway down the creaking stairs, his leather duster swaying, his deep brown eyes locked on Gideon, whose black coat seemed to drink the light, his gray eyes glinting like a blade. The mining boss's voice cut through the silence. You can't protect M. Kane. That ledger's mine, and so's the truth it holds. Mara Tate gripped her derringer behind the bar, her graying braid tight, her brown eyes blazing with defiance. Upstairs, in the shadowed room, Leela crouched with her boys, Caleb and Sam, under the cot, the torn satchel clutched tight, its secrets heavier than ever. Levi's hand hovered over his revolver, his voice low and steady. "You'll have to kill me to get it, Voss," he said, his words a challenge carved in stone. Gideon smirked, his gray eyes narrowing, but before he could answer, a torch sailed through the broken window, landing on a whiskey-soaked table. Flames erupted, licking the walls with greedy tongues, the air choking with smoke. Mara cursed, grabbing a bucket of water, but another torch followed, igniting the bar's edge. "You bastard!" she shouted, firing her derringer, the shot grazing Gideon's shoulder. His men returned fire, bullets splintering wood, as patrons scrambled for the door, their shouts drowned by the fire's roar. Upstairs, Leela pressed Caleb and Sam closer, her amber eyes wide with fear, her faded crimson dress singed at the hem. "Stay low," she whispered, her voice trembling but fierce. Caleb, his blonde hair damp with sweat, clutched the satchel, his voice a hiss. "They'll burn us, Ma." Sam, his dark curls plastered to his face, whimpered, his small hands gripping her arm. The trapdoor under the rug was their only hope, but the smoke was thickening, curling through the floorboards like a living thing. Lila's heart pounded, her mind racing to her husband, Josiah, who died for that ledger record of Gideon's stolen mining claims, bribes, and the livery fire that killed Mara's brother. She couldn't let it fall into Gideon's hands, not after all it had cost. Levi ducked behind a table, his revolver barking, dropping one of Gideon's men with a shot to the chest. The saloon was a battlefield now, flames climbing the walls, smoke stinging his eyes. Mara fought beside him, her derringer spent, now swinging a chair at a hired gun who lunged toward the stairs. "They're upstairs, Kane," she yelled, her voice raw. Levi bolted up, his boots pounding, as Gideon's second man fired, the bullet grazing his arm, blood seeping through his duster. He reached the room, kicking the door open, and found Leela struggling to lift the trapdoor, her hands shaking, the boys coughing in the smoke. "Go," he shouted, pulling the rug aside, revealing the dark cellar below. As Leela and the boys descended, Levi turned, his revolver raised, just as Gideon appeared at the door, his shotgun gleaming. "You're a dead man, Kane," he growled, his gray eyes wild with greed. Levi fired, the bullet clipping Gideon's hat, sending it spinning into the flames. "Not yet," Levi said, shoving the door shut and dragging a crate to block it. The cellar's damp air hit them like a slap, the darkness swallowing the lantern's faint glow. Leela clutched the satchel, her amber eyes meeting Levi's. "Josiah said the ledger names Gideon and a judge," she whispered, her voice breaking. "They killed him to keep it quiet." Levi's jaw tightened, his bloodied arm throbbing. "Then we keep it safe," he said, "for him, and for you." Mara's voice echoed from below, urgent and sharp. "Cellar leads to the alley. Move." They stumbled through the narrow passage, the roar of the fire above muffled but relentless. The boys' bare feet slapped the cold earth, their breaths ragged, as they emerged into the alley. The night air was sharp with dust, the saloons glow painting the sky red. Levi scanned the shadows, his revolver ready. But Gideon's men were close. He could hear their boots on the street. The ledger was their shield and their curse, a truth that could topple an empire or bury them all. What names did it hold? And what would it cost Levi and Mara to protect a family they'd only just found? The alley behind the rusty spur was a maze of shadows, the Nevada night sharp with the bite of dust and smoke. Levi Kane led Leela and her boys, Caleb and Sam, through the narrow passage, his leather duster stained with blood from a grazed arm, his deep brown eyes scanning the darkness. Leela clutched the torn satchel, her black hair wild, her amber eyes wide with fear, her faded crimson dress singed at the edges. Caleb's blonde hair was matted with sweat, his hands tight on the satchel's strap, while Sam's dark curls clung to his pale face, his small body trembling. The saloon burned behind them, its flames painting the sky red. Gideon Voss's shouts echoing, "Find them, or you're dead men." Mara Tate trailed close, her derringer empty, her graying braid loose, her brown eyes fierce with resolve. They ducked into a crumbling shed at the alley's end, its walls sagging under years of neglect. The air was damp, heavy with the scent of rotten ash. Levi barred the door with a rusted beam, his revolver drawn, his breath steady despite the pain in his arm. "We can't run forever," he said. His voice low, Leela sank to the floor, pulling Caleb and Sam close, their bare feet caked with dirt. "That ledger," she whispered, her voice breaking. "It's all Josiah left us, names, dates. Claims Gideon stole proof he burned the livery to hide his crimes." Mara's face hardened. Her brother's death in that fire wound that. "Never closed. And a judge," she said. "You said it names a judge," Leela nodded. Her amber eyes haunted. "Judge Harlan in Carson City. He took bribes to bury Gideon's tracks." Levi's jaw tightened, his mind racing. A judge meant power that could crush a town like Iron Hollow. "We need to get that ledger to someone who'll listen," he said. But before Leela could reply, a sharp crack split the air, a rifle shot grazing the shed's wall. Gideon's men were closing in, their boots crunching in the alley. Levi peered through a crack, spotting 3 shadows, rifles glinting in the moonlight. "Stay down," he hissed, his revolver ready. The shed shook as a second shot splintered. The door. Mara grabbed a rusted pitchfork from the corner, her voice a growl. "I ain't losing another piece of my life to Voss." Lila's hands trembled, but she opened the satchel, revealing a small, leather-bound ledger. Its pages yellowed, stained with blood, Josiah's blood. Caleb's voice broke. "A whisper. Pa said to keep it safe." Sam whimpered, his small hands clutching Lila's dress. The fire's glow crept closer, and Levi knew they were running out of time. He kicked open a loose board at the shed's back, leading them into the open desert. The night cold and vast, but then the plot twist as they crouched behind a dune. Lila's eyes widened, her fingers tracing a hidden pocket in the satchel. She pulled out a folded letter, sealed with wax, addressed to the U.S. Marshal, Carson City. Her voice shook as she read it aloud. "Josiah wrote this. He named Gideon Harlan, and a marshal who turned a blind eye. He was gonna mail it before they killed him." Levi's heart sank. The ledger wasn't just evidence, it was a death sentence, implicating not just Gideon but a network of corruption. If they delivered it, they'd bring down an empire, but they'd also paint a target on their backs. Mara's eyes blazed. "That letter's why they want you dead," she said. "And why we gotta fight." A shout rang out. Gideon's men had spotted them. Levi fired, his revolver's roar echoing across the dunes, dropping 1 man in the sand. Mara swung her pitchfork, catching another in the arm, but the 3rd man charged, his rifle raised. Leela shoved the boys behind her, her amber eyes fierce, and threw a rock, stunning the man long enough for Levi to tackle him. The desert was chaos now, gunfire and shouts mingling with the distant crackle of the saloon's flames. They ran, the ledger and letter clutched tight, but Gideon's voice carried on the wind. "You can't hide the truth forever." Could Levi and Mara protect Leela and the boys, or would the ledger's secrets bury them all in the desert's dust? The Nevada desert stretched endless under a moonlit sky, its dunes casting jagged shadows as Levi Kane led Leela, Caleb, and Sam through the night. His leather duster was torn, blood seeping from his grazed arm, his deep brown eyes sharp despite the pain. Leela clutched the satchel, its ledger and letter proof of Gideon Voss's crimes heavy in her hands. Her black hair wild, her amber eyes burning with defiance. Her faded crimson dress was singed, her bare feet bleeding on the sand. Caleb's blonde hair glinted in the moonlight, his hands tight on the satchel, while Sam's dark curls bounced as he stumbled, his small frame trembling. Mara Tate followed, her graying braid loose, her brown eyes fierce, a rusted pitchfork her only weapon. Behind them, the rusty spur burned, its flames a beacon for Gideon's men. Their shouts cutting through the wind, they crouched behind a rocky outcrop, the desert's chill biting their skin. Levi's revolver gleamed, his voice low. "We get that ledger to Carson City, to the U.S. Marshal. It's our only shot." Leela nodded, her amber eyes haunted. "Josiah died for it," she whispered. "I won't let it be for nothing." Caleb's voice cracked. "A boy trying to be a man. They'll kill us, won't they?" Sam whimpered, clinging to Leela. Mara gripped her pitchfork, her voice steady. "Not if we fight." But the sound of hooves thundered closer, and Levi spotted Gideon's men for now, rifles raised, led by Gideon himself, his black coat billowing. Gray eyes wild with greed. The desert erupted in chaos. Levi fired, his revolver's roar dropping one man in the sand. Mara swung her pitchfork, catching another in the leg, but a bullet grazed her shoulder, blood blooming on her apron. Leela shoved the boys behind the rock, her hands shaking as she pulled the ledger from the satchel. If we don't make it, she whispered to Levi, take this. End it. Levi's eyes met hers, a silent vow, but before he could answer, Gideon charged, his shotgun blasting, shattering the rock's edge. The ledger's mine, he roared, his gray eyes mad. Levi tackled him, the two men rolling in the sand, fists and blood flying as the shotgun skidded away. Mara fought off another hired gun, her pitchfork snapping, but her strength held. Caleb, in a burst of courage, threw a rock, stunning the last man long enough for Levi to knock him out. Gideon rose, his face bloodied, and lunged for the satchel, now loose in the sand. Leela dove, grabbing it, but Gideon's hand closed on her wrist, twisting hard. You're dead, all of you, he snarled. Then, a new sound. Hooves. Not Gideon's, but a dozen townsfolk from Iron Hollow, led by Amos Reed, the blacksmith. His hammer raised. Enough, Voss, Amos bellowed. This town's done with your lies. The crowd closed in, their lanterns casting a golden glow, their faces hardened by years of Gideon's greed. Gideon froze, outnumbered, his gray eyes darting. Levi stood, revolver aimed, blood dripping from his arm. It's over, he said. Gideon laughed, bitter and broken, and bolted into the desert, vanishing into the dunes. Leela clutched the satchel, tears streaking her face, as Caleb and Sam ran to her, their small arms wrapping around her. Mara sank to her knees, her shoulder bleeding but her brown eyes steady. You did it, she said to Levi, her voice soft. He shook his head. We did. The townsfolk surrounded them, their whispers turning to vows to deliver the ledger to Carson City, to expose Judge Harlan and the corrupt marshal. Months later, Iron Hollow was quieter, its scars healing under a new dawn. Levi rebuilt the saloon. With Mara, their hands calloused but their hearts lighter, Leela and the boys stayed, their laughter filling the cabin Levi shared with them, the satchel now empty. Its ledger sent to the marshal, a Paiute woven basket, a gift from a local elder, sat on the saloon's counter, a reminder of the land's deeper history. In the 1880s, Nevada's mining towns were battlegrounds of greed, where men like Gideon exploited land and people, often displacing tribes like the Paiute. This story isn't just about a ledger, it's about chosen family and standing for truth. If this tale of courage and justice moved you, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and join our Wild West journey. Comment, would you fight a town to protect a stranger's secret?